At Mighty Parenting, we hear a lot of great information, and we hear how we can support our kids as they grow and learn and develop through their teen years and into their 20-something years. And as a parent, some of that requires modeling behaviors, some of that requires changing our behaviors, and all of it relies on our ability to stay reasonably calm. Not that we can't make a mistake and apologize later. However, it's a lot easier when we have that calm core in ourselves. I've developed a resource to help with that. It's a complimentary lesson on stress relief. You can get that at sandyfowler.com/stress relief. A little something to help you balance those scales, calm your nervous system, lessen triggers, and be the parent you want to be. Just pop over to sandyfowler.com/stress relief.
Welcome to Mighty Parenting, a podcast with real, raw, and relevant talk about raising teens and parenting young adults.
Welcome to Mighty Parenting, a community where we help you raise teens and parent 20-somethings so they can become happy, successful, and emotionally healthy adults. I'm Sandy Fowler, stress relief guide for moms and host of the Mighty Parenting podcast. A quick reminder, pop over to mightyparenting.com. We have a free email series for you on how to talk to your teen. And when you open the first one, even if you're upset with me, just be patient, wait one day and open the second one, and you will be much happier. I've had some complaints about parents not liking the first one, but then finding out that when they do what it says, it helps. So, little sneak peek there. All right, we're raising teens. We've got 20-somethings. And I think back to when we're waiting for these little bundles of joy to show up in our lives. And what do we do as parents? We dream. We dream about holding them, about spending time with them. We dream about enjoying this great relationship when they're all grown up. What we don't dream about is arguing and talking back and lying or manipulation. They're things no parent really wants to think about or deal with. And they are definitely more challenging problems than we like to encounter with our teenagers. They're also problems that can erode our relationship when we don't know how to handle them and how to deal with them. The good news is that there are solutions, and Kimball Lewis from empoweringparents.com is joining us today to take a look at those challenging behaviors, things like teens lying and talking back to us, so that we can understand what's happening and what we can do about it. Welcome to Mighty Parenting, Kimball.
Thanks, Sandy. Glad to be here.
So let's kick this off by talking about lying. And what I'd actually like to know is, what kinds of misconceptions do parents have about lying?
Well, at Empowering Parents, one of the key things that we tell parents is it's very helpful not to view lying as a moral issue, like there's something morally wrong with your child if they're lying or lying to you, and view it as a behavior issue, because ultimately kids are confronted with problems that they haven't had before in their life, like having to get up and do schoolwork and deal with peer pressure and all sorts of stuff, things that they just haven't dealt with in life before. And they have to solve those problems. And for us, those are just everyday problems that as adults we've kind of figured out. But for them, it's brand new. Like, when a child or a teen, if for the first time in their lives is accountable to something or to someone, which is either like a job or getting schoolwork done, and those are problems for them, and they have to somehow solve those problems. And one of their and they can be responsible and solve things like effective ways and learn that. But one of the ways they solve those problems is by lying. Like, lying is a reasonable way to, like, in a kid's mind, it actually works sometimes. You can get out of a responsibility, you can get out of trouble by lying. And so we always view it as not a moral issue, as it's a behavior issue, and the kid has, your child has poor problem solving skills, and they try to solve whatever problem they're having is by lying. So that's one of the key things, is that it's not a moral issue. There's not something wrong with your child. And the vast majority of the cases, They're just trying to solve a problem they have, and they're not doing it in a very effective way.
Yeah, I think about it, and even as adults, there are certainly times that we just lie our way out of a situation
Yeah.
because either, like you said, we don't know how else to get out of it, or it just seems like the easiest, fastest, it's the path of least resistance.
Yeah. So it's a behavior issue, and we tell parents also, like, don't take it personally when your child lies to you. It's hard not to, though, right? Because they look you right in the face, and they tell you something that's not true, and it's not true. But again, it's you just happen to be that person who either sets limits or they're accountable to. They would have lied to anyone to solve this problem, and you take it personally. And it's actually important not to take it personally, and just and say, hey, my kid has a behavior problem that somehow I need to help my child with, and that's a big part of the lying. So it's not a moral issue, it's a behavior issue, and don't take it personally. It's very hard, though, because when your child lies to you, like, of course you take it personally. But if you want to be effective in addressing the issue, it's best to sort of, you have to separate yourself from your child and just say, wait a second, there's just another person here who's got a problem they're trying to solve, and they're doing it through lying, and it's not working. So.
Well, what happens when we take it personally? You've said it's really important not to take it personally. What do you see happening when a parent takes the lying personally?
Well, Sandy, you mentioned at the beginning, which is we raise our kids, right? And we're all excited about, you have this bundle of joy, and you come home with a baby, and they're toddlers, and you take care of them, and it's stressful, but it's like there's love, there's a lot of love going on. And then when they hit their teenage years, this child that you feel like you've sacrificed for many years and loved or whatever, now they rebel, they talk back to you, and you start thinking and which is all normal. This is what kids go through. But you start having these feelings of like they don't appreciate what I did for them and took care of them for 10, 12, 13, 14 years. Like, there's no appreciation for all the sacrifices made for your child. And the truth is, we tell parents is that they're not going to appreciate it. They don't, there's no kid who really appreciates it. Maybe when they're like 20, 30, 25, 30, later on in life, they'll appreciate it. Or maybe it's until they have their own kids, they appreciate what their parents did for them. But you're not going to get appreciation out of your kid. It's just, if you're expecting that, you're going to be disappointed. And if you are expecting that, and you take it personally, you're going to not like your child, and that's going to hurt your relationship. Or if you view the lying as you've taken it personally, and there's something morally wrong with my child, it hurts the relationship. It actually hurts your ability to connect with your child and get them to improve whatever behaviors they're having. So it doesn't make the lying go away necessarily. Like, you still, it takes some work to get your kid to come around and stop lying to you if that's the way that you're trying to solve their problems. But taking it personally is going to hurt the relationship. And if your relationship is hurt and you start feeling bitter towards your child, it becomes much harder to rectify that. So, we have an article on our site which is really, really popular, and it's kind of sad that it's popular, but in a way, it's great because there's so many comments on it, and parents can acknowledge a feeling they have. A lot of parents, when their kids get into their teen years, they don't like their child. That's a common Google search that brings people to our sites. Like, I don't like my child, and they feel horrible about it. They don't know what to do about it. And it's a very popular article with lots of comments on it where parents are talking about, yeah, I don't like my child. Like, my child, like, he's not nice to me, and and they feel terrible guilt. And we bring up in the article that it's you got to tell yourself it's what you don't like is your child's behavior, and the choices your child is making, and not that you don't like your child. And you don't have to be best friends with your child. You don't have to be, some parents aren't going to connect necessarily with their child the way they might with a friend or whatever, but that doesn't mean that they don't love their child. And it doesn't mean that they can't be an effective parent and do what they need to do for their child. So these are all things that come up that make parenting really hard. It's emotional. So if I answer, I'm keep going on and on.
Yeah. So, well, I have 2 questions. So
Yeah.
take one at a time. And first, all right, so they're lying and this is a behavior problem. Okay, big, huge sigh of relief. Phew. We can help them change behavior, hopefully. And that's one
Yep.
thing, I guess, too, we have to accept is that we can't make another human being do anything. We talk about that on the show. Like you cannot
Oh, you do.
make
That's
your
good.
child
Yes.
do anything like that, right?
Yeah, they're responsible for their behavior, not you.
Right.
It's their
So,
behavior, not your behavior, right? So don't feel guilty about it. It's their behavior.
but our behavior does impact theirs, right? So
Exactly.
behavior, besides not taking this personally, reminding ourselves of these things,
Yep.
what behavior can we do? What actions can we take or not take to help them shift that behavior? Because depending on the amount they're doing it, like you said, yes, there's some natural path through lying, going, okay, I'm still learning problem solving skills, or they do it once in a while. And if they never learn those skills, this can become habitual. And I can see where for some kids, I mean, as a parent, you're looking at it going, oh my gosh, how will they hold a job? How will they have friends? How will they have relationships if they're lying to people all the time?
Yep. So so there's a few things. So now your child's lying and you're like, it's like, okay, and I'm trying not to take it personally. I see it's a behavior issue now, but what do I do? Which is great to get to that point. So first of all, you always confront the lies. If they're lying, you confront them on it. You say, no, that's not true. You're lying to me. And explain to them if you don't confront the lies, the problem is a lot of these kids, they start believing their lies. You know what I mean? They have these things in psychology, they call them cognitive distortions or thinking errors. And they start believing their lies even, which is a problem. But you need to confront the lie whenever they do it. And not be afraid to do that. And when you confront the lie, your child's not going to like you and it's going to cause arguments and other things, but don't let them get away with the lying. And don't let them, because they're using it right as a problem solving skill. And if you lie and you don't confront it, and that their lie actually becomes successful, right? And that reinforces whatever it is that they were doing. Like, oh, I actually got out of it because of my lie. So one thing is you always confront the lie.
So you said there can be, obviously this makes sense to me. I confront my child. I say, you're lying. They deny it. They get angry. So I understand the initial statement of, no, you're lying to me, and stating the evidence, the proof, this is the reality. And then I stop talking and they get angry. They push back. What do I do at that point? Do I drop it once I've stated that this is a lie? Do I keep pushing this issue? Am I trying to get them to accept that and agree with me? What's happening there?
Yeah. So when parents come to us, they're having this problem over and over again. It's not like the child lied once, right? So when this is a problem with parents, it's happening a lot, which is actually a good thing in the sense that you can prepare for what you're going to do. And so you confront the lie, but ahead of time, you know what are the consequences for lying, and you just set up a set of consequences for what they did, or so they're lying about something, right? And it's better to have the consequence based on the behavior that they did, not on the lie itself.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So let's say they lied about, I don't know, their schoolwork or something, or something that happened. They need consequences for those things that they did badly. And you can have a consequence for the lying as well. But it needs to be something reasonable. And what you want to do is confront the behaviors that led to the lie in the first place. Like they're trying to get out of something. So when they do lie and you confront it, you don't need to have a long conversation about it. You just say, I know you're lying, and here are the consequences for this thing that you did. And you want reasonable, effective consequences, not punishments, a consequence for something that they did. That so they know when they do X that Y happens. And you sort of be a little bit dispassionate about the whole thing. In other words, you don't need to have a long speech to them and a long conversation about why lying is not right or not wrong. It's, you're lying to me. I know you're lying to me. Here's why, and here are your consequences. And the conversation can kind of end at that point.
Okay, so even if they're saying, no, I didn't, you can just say, I hear you and I know you were lying. You could like essentially just repeat what you
Yes.
said,
Yep.
like you said dispassionately, because it's that emotion,
Yeah.
it's that feeling of being hurt and disappointed that creates a lot more problem
Yeah.
and creates issues in the relationship too. I'm guessing, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I'm just listening to this, I'm thinking, well, if we come back at our kid with all this emotion, then that takes it out of the realm of just truth and reality versus the distortion. Now that's bringing in a whole nother world without even saying anything about it.
Yeah. And you don't even need to go to that world.
Right, right. So if we're
Um,
dispassionate, it leaves everything else out. We are functioning just in truth and lies,
yeah.
and that's it. And there
Yep.
isn't anything else.
And after the lie, like when the lie is, when you're confronting the lie and what's going on, and there's a consequence for their lying, and we have articles on what are effective consequences. There are some consequences that don't work really well, and there's some that are effective. And we can go into that a little bit later on, but if you like, but at the time of the lying, you just want to apply the consequence, tell them you're lying to me, confront it, apply the consequence, and you can kind of end it there. You can later on, the next day or a couple days later, actually schedule a time to sit down and talk to your child about what the problem with the lying is and why, when there's lying, it creates mistrust. And when there's mistrust, there's consequences. Like, for example, I can't trust you, um, you know, to have your room closed or whatever. Maybe there's
Mhm.
alcohol. There's a lot of things that could be going on, and you can explain to your child, like, you've lied to me, and you're going to have to gain your trust back. And in the meantime, the consequences are, I need to be able to either check your phone, or you need to have the room open, the door to your room open, things like that. So, but
Okay.
you can have that discussion, a day or two later when things are calm and you're not in the midst of you dealing with a specific lie.
Well, and that gives us an opportunity then to sit down calmly. Hopefully everyone is calm when you've scheduled this, and to say, hey, I understand the desire to lie. When you're in a situation, when you've got a problem, it's a way of feels like a way of avoiding consequences or avoiding an uncomfortable situation. And you might get away with it sometimes. I mean, I'm sure you have through your life at some points gotten away with it.
Yeah.
But those things do catch up with you and they get bigger and they get more important. So let's work on problem solving skills. Let's talk about some situations that make you uncomfortable and see if we can figure out together
Yeah.
how we can get you through it another way. It can open up that conversation,
Yep.
is what I'm feeling like.
And they may or may not want to have that conversation.
Right.
And if they don't, it's actually okay too. Because then you just follow up on the consequences, and you say, and as you're giving the consequences, you can say, look, the next time this happens, instead of lying, here are a couple things you might want to do, and you can just explain it to them, and then leave it at that. They don't have to agree with you. You've planted the seed that there is an alternative. And then if they're in the habit of lying, they're going to lie again, and they're going to lie again, and they're going to lie again. And if you follow this approach consistently, eventually they will. They might experiment. They'll figure something out. They'll have a situation where they don't lie, and they realize it actually turns out okay for them, or in a better place for them. So just because you apply one of these approaches once and it doesn't seem to work, doesn't mean it's not working. It just means that for some kids, it might take several weeks of going through this before they get it.
Well, as you said, this is a lack of problem solving skills.
Right.
So it's going to take them time to develop those skills. So along the way, we can look for opportunities to show appreciation or encouragement as they try out those skills.
And it could be they want to have that conversation where they learn better problem solving, different ways of approaching when they have an issue instead of lying about it. But they may not want to have that conversation until you've consistently applied consequences, 4, 5, 6, 7 times.
Mm-hmm. Well,
then maybe they're willing to have the conversation.
Well, and as you said, even if they don't want to have a conversation, if we can just say, hey, and here's some other options, or here's another choice you could have made, or something else you could try next time, you just keep dropping those. They might not ever want to have the conversation, and they're still learning other options along the
Yeah.
way and hopefully testing those out. So I like that. And we need to move on because we have a couple of things I want to really hit on today. And one is arguing and talking back, which kind of
Mhm.
come together. And for our mighty parents, as we talk here and we talk about listening to our kids and moving to that place of being a coach rather than a disciplinarian, but moving into a place where you're letting them take control of their life, where you're listening to what they have to say. Emotion is involved, hormones are involved, and that listening to them can be a blurry line between that and talking back, which all leads to an argument.
Mhm.
So I'd like to tease that apart a little and go, how do we look at it and go, well, wait a minute, this is talking back in a way that is actually an issue.
Yeah, I
It's
know
not
exactly.
just, it's not healthy pushing back. Like what makes that a problem for us and what can we do about that?
So this is actually how I got involved in empowering parents, which was the foundations of all of our programs at Empowering Parents is a program called the Total Transformation Program. And it was put together by a child behavior specialist named James Lehman. And in the late 2000s, he was on the radio doing advertising, and I was driving my car and I heard his ad, and he was from the area where I was living at the time. So I had some awareness of him, but his ad was just what stuck with me forever. He said that you don't have to attend every argument that you're invited to.
Oh,
He
I
goes,
love that.
you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You can RSVP no to your child's argument. And then he went on and said, when your child is using arguing and defiance as a way to solve their problems, and they're doing it continually, you don't have to attend those arguments. So if you're dealing with a child who's constantly arguing, and arguing about the rules and everything else, chances are what's really going on is they're not arguing specifically about the rules. They don't want them to apply to them, and they're using arguing as a technique to get you to give in. And it happens all the time. So let's say your child doesn't want to do chores or doesn't want to do their homework, and they argue about it and argue about it, and they escalate it. And eventually either the parent gives in or the parent stops trying to hold them accountable. It's not worth the fight. I worked all day. I'm exhausted. I've come home. I don't want to fight with my kids. The last thing I want. And then you stop holding your child accountable because of the arguing. And so they've actually trained you through all of their arguing not to hold them accountable anymore. And James Lehman in this program, he has these very specific cases where parents are dealing with this over and over and over again. He says, when it happens, you don't have to attend that. When your child starts, yelling and getting in your face and becoming verbally abusive and arguing, you can walk away from it. You just say to them directly, don't talk to me like that. I can't talk to you when you argue like that, and you walk away and you no longer talk to them. And they don't drag you into that argument. And when it's one of the first techniques in the Total Transformation Program that we have parents apply when they're having this issue. It's incredibly powerful because the child doesn't understand what's going on. This tool that's been so effective for them, which is a powerless child, basically, who's not in charge of anyone. They're not in charge of the rules at school. They're not the boss at work. They're teenagers, right? They're just getting their way in the world. But they have this incredible control over their parents, the way that no one has any control over anyone in the world, right? Your kids have this power. And when you walk away from their arguing, their fighting, which is the way that they use to solve their problem, basically, when you walk away from that, suddenly they're like, it's almost like they're naked. Like they don't have this thing that worked for them for so long doesn't work anymore. Like my parents not listening to me. They shut off and they walked away. So what's happening is they're using that arguing and fighting as a way to solve this problem. They either have a responsibility they want to meet, or I'm sorry, they're supposed to meet and they don't want to, or they're not able to, or it causes them stress. And the way they get out of the responsibility instead of doing that thing is they argue about it. And in so many cases, we see parents, they don't like the fighting and the arguing, and they absolve their child of the responsibility. And the child is like, oh, that worked. And the next time it happens, they do the arguing again, and it worked. So when you walk away from the argument, it takes a lot of steam out of that energy, and they don't know what's going on.
It's so interesting because this would always be the case. Nobody wants to spend all their time arguing
No.
with a child, a teen, a 20 something, whatever. And the busier our culture has gotten, as the stress and the anxiety levels ratchet up, I can see it becoming harder and harder for parents to stick to it, to
Yeah.
stick to holding them accountable, to even following up on, have they done their chores? Have they done their homework? You get home from work or you finish out a day at home and you're tired.
Yeah.
You just want to sit down, have a nice family dinner, and then chill. Maybe you're a person who wants to play games. Maybe you're a person who wants to just relax, and you still have chores to do. So the last thing you want to be doing is following up with
Yeah.
someone who is almost an adult and try to hold them accountable for
Yep.
everything. So that makes
And-
all the sense in the world. So we take away this tool that's been working. How do we show them what else can work?
Yeah, so that's the thing. So for your child to develop better problem solving skills is you have to make sure that the tools they're using, which are not good life skills, that those no longer work. And walking away from those arguments is saying to you, that thing you've been doing to solve your problems for the last few years is no longer working for me, because I'm not even going to have those conversations with you. And then when things calm down, you can have a problem solving conversation with them and say, like, look, well, actually, you have to combine that with consequences. So when they're verbally abusive or they're not doing something, you need to have your consequences in place, and you need to dispassionately apply those consequences and say, look, when you do X, Y happens, and be very consistent with those consequences. So you walk away from the arguing. There's no sense having the arguing. They're not arguing about the rules, they're arguing to get out of the rules. And then you have consequences for whatever it is they haven't done. Like if they haven't done their chores, if they haven't done their homework, there are consequences for those. And then you need to give them alternative skills. And so you have problem solving conversations with them. And the problem solving conversation looks something like this: when things are calm, not when the fight's happening, it's later on. You say, look, if you're not going to do your, if you can't get up and get to school, for example, what can you do to help improve that situation? Maybe go to bed earlier, maybe, figure out, talk with them through and try to figure out, what would actually work in this situation for them. Because no longer is the case that you're arguing and you're fighting or whatever, and that's not going to work anymore. Because once you head down that route, I'm going to shut off, I'm going to walk away, and there are going to be consequences, and we're not going to fight anymore. Okay. So you have that. So you make sure that they're you make sure that they're ineffective behaviors, which in a way are effective with the parent. They've been effective. That's why they do it. But it's not a good life skill. It's not what you want them doing as they're entering into the world and things are getting more complicated. You don't want arguing and fighting to be the way that they approach life. You want to make sure those don't work. That's what the disconnecting and not attending the arguments is about. You want to have consistent consequences, and then you need to have problem solving conversations with your kid. That's usually the third step, because they're not ready for those conversations until their current problem solving skills no longer working, which is the arguing, the fighting, and real consequences are being applied to them. Not punitive things, but just like, if you don't do your homework, you lose your phone. Like, and you take their phone until they get their homework done, and the second they get their homework done, they get their phone back. And you don't get angry about it. You're just like, look, the consequence of not getting your work done is either you can't go out, or you don't get your phone, or you lose electronics privileges or whatever. And once you do get your work done, you get it back, and you want them to get it back. That's that's one of the effective consequences is they get that thing back that you took away by performing an action, by meeting that responsibility. They get it back.
So the framework is very similar to lying. How does manipulation work? I'm assuming that's going to be a similar kind of framework, right? The kids are manipulating because it works. How do we stop that, and what do we do with them instead there?
Yeah, we sort of put that in the same category as lying, is that when they're manipulating you call it out. You say, look,
okay,
you're manipulating me, or you let them know, and you can actually walk away from those conversations too. But the key thing is to recognize that again, their manipulation of you is a behavior problem. Don't take it personally. Try not to. It's hard to. That's the thing. You're like, you're gonna explode once in a while, even when you kind of know what you're doing. Like sometimes you just like push to the limit. And you have to like forgive yourself when you do that because no one's perfect. But just recognize when they're doing manipulation, and then address it, saying, "Look, are you trying to intimidate me? Are you trying to bully me? What you're doing is trying to manipulate the situation, and I'm not going to have it." And you walk away from it. You apply the consequences.
Okay.
You know,
Well, and I love it. Yeah. Sorry,
my
go ahead.
son, like, I don't know, my son worked at McDonald's for like a year. It was actually a great experience for him. And he was responsible, but if he didn't show up at work, his boss didn't yell at him. He didn't like get screamed at or whatever. He didn't get paid. And maybe the boss had a conversation with him, like, look, you need to you need to be on time or whatever. But there's no like yelling and screaming and there's no like taking it personally. It's a little more businesslike. And as your kids get older, you need to be a little bit more businesslike about the whole thing, and think to yourself, like, what if I'm the boss and this is an employee? How would I handle it? And if you have a good boss, they hold you accountable. Like if you don't show up, you don't get paid. If you continually don't go show up, you might get fired actually. And it's hard to fire your kid. Like that doesn't quite work that way. but there's sort of dispassionate consequences, which is you just don't get paid and you want to apply it that way. And one thing you got to ask yourself, Sandy, you got to ask yourself, is your child behaving this way with everyone or just you as the parent? And the reason I ask that is that the vast majority of the time that these kids that are arguing and fighting and everything else, it's more an issue with their parents, and they're not doing it with the outside world quite as much. There are a few kids that are really oppositional, and any type of authority, whether it's police officers, whether it's bosses, whether it's school or whatever, like they don't like any authority and they rebel no matter what. Like we call those oppositional defiant, but that's not the majority of cases. The majority of cases is the manipulation is going on with the parents because it works.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't work as much at school, and it doesn't work at work because they actually will lose their job or they don't get paid. And maybe it works a couple of times if they lose their job a few times. If they actually need the money, they'll start behaving correctly in order to keep their job.
Okay, so what I heard in there was actually really good. If it's just you, instead of sitting back and being frustrated, like, oh my gosh, why do they treat me like this? It's like, yay, that's good news. This is just a behavior issue we can talk about. If it's everywhere, you might want to consider getting an outside consult, talking to a professional, a school counselor, somebody to get a different perspective to find out if you need some professional help with your family, with your child. And it's not just your child, that's going to be you too, because there are behaviors going on at home and you will need to change. All right,
and we work with both parents, but most of the cases, most people that come with us, and the vast majority of these things, it's a parent-child issue, not a child, the rest of the world issue.
Which is good news. And Kimball, I've so much more I'd love to talk about, but we have maxed out our time. So I appreciate you being on the show. Anyone who's listening who wants to learn more can go to empoweringparents.com. But thank you for sharing all of this today. And I'll get a couple of those articles from you. We'll put links to those in the show notes, along with any other resources that might be helpful for parents.
Okay. And Facebook and Instagram also, we have our content out there as well. So, and just search for Empowering Parents and you'll find us. Empowering Parents. Great. Thank you, Sandy. And Mighty Parents, thank you so much for joining us today and being part of the Mighty Parenting community. Remember, you are a mighty parent. You got this. And I will see you next week.